The rain fell softly against the tall windows of the Chicago Historical Society that morning, a quiet rhythmic tapping that seemed almost deliberate, as though the city itself wanted to whisper something long forgotten. Professor Marcus Thompson sat alone in his office, the air around him heavy with the scent of old paper and mahogany polish. On his desk, dozens of sepia-toned photographs waited to be catalogued, silent fragments of lives once vivid. But one photograph, just one, had stopped him cold. It was dated 1901. A simple family portrait, the kind found in countless attics and antique stores. A father, a mother, and two children posed stiffly in their Sunday best. Yet something about it, something about the way the light caught the woman's eyes, made Marcus pause. He leaned forward, adjusting his glasses. The man behind the chair, tall, broad, with the authority of wealth etched into his posture, rested a hand upon his wife's shoulder. The gesture was meant to look protective, but even at a glance it seemed heavy, possessive. The woman's face was serene, but not peaceful. Her expression, resigned, almost hollow, betrayed something she could not say aloud. And her high-collared dress, dark and modest, sat strangely against her throat. Too tight, too deliberate. Marcus frowned. He had catalogued photographs for 15 years. Nothing in this portrait should have unsettled him. But as the autumn light shifted through his window, shadows fell differently across the image, and a faint discoloration beneath the woman's collar seemed to emerge just at the edge of visibility. He reached for his magnifying glass, adjusting the desk lamp to cut through the glare. And there, beneath the delicate lace, were faint dark marks. Not stains, not age spots. They were too uniform, too intentional, following a shape no photographer's error could explain. Marcus's breath fogged the glass as he whispered to himself, "This can't be right." But it was. The more he adjusted the light, the clearer it became, faint traces circling her neck, the way rope might have, or hands. Her husband's thumb pressed into her collarbone with a force that suddenly looked cruel. Her smile, once polite, now seemed desperate, and her children standing close beside her appeared to shield her rather than pose with her. The photograph, Marcus realized, wasn't just a portrait, it was a message. By the next morning, the thought still haunted him. He traced the photograph's origins to an estate sale, one belonging to a woman named Eleanor Hayes. She had died at 93. Her belongings carefully documented by a lawyer named Robert Chen. Robert's office smelled of dust and cedar when Marcus visited. The man adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses as he reviewed his notes. Mrs. Hayes mentioned that old chest several times, he said. She said it contained family secrets that should probably stay buried, but she couldn't destroy them. She wanted someone someday to know. That word lingered, secrets. When Robert examined the photograph under the morning light, his face changed. That must be her great-grandmother Catherine. She died young, very young, under what Mrs. Hayes called mysterious circumstances. The name struck Marcus like a bell. Catherine Whitmore. Married into one of Chicago's wealthiest families at the dawn of the 1900s. The Whitmores, owners of textile mills and sprawling properties. A few days later, Marcus stood in the quiet hallway of Eleanor Hayes' old bungalow in Evanston. The air smelled faintly of lavender and age. In the attic beneath, beams heavy with time, sat a cedar chest, the same one from which the photograph had come. He opened it carefully. Inside were more photographs and a journal bound in worn leather. Jenny, his research assistant, leaned close. "Professor, look at this." The journal's cover was cracked, its pages yellowed but preserved. On the first page, written in delicate ink, was a date. March 15th, 1901. "My dearest diary." It began, "I pray that someday someone will understand what happened to me. Should anything prevent me from telling it myself." Marcus read in silence. Each page drew him deeper into a life of quiet terror. Catherine wrote of her husband, Thomas Whitmore. Respected, admired, but behind closed doors. Volatile. The children have learned to make themselves invisible when he raises his voice, one entry read. "And I wear higher collars now, longer sleeves, to cover the evidence of his displeasure." Marcus's hands trembled as he turned the pages. The formal portrait from 1901, the photograph that had seemed so ordinary, was taken in the same year Catherine wrote those words. It wasn't just a keepsake, it was her warning. She knew Marcus whispered to Jenny. She sat for that portrait, knowing it would be the only truth she could leave behind. With each passage, the story deepened. Thomas's violence grew worse, his cruelty hidden beneath the mask of a dutiful husband. Catherine's diary became both confession and evidence, a record she hoped would someday be found. When Marcus enlarged the photograph using his archival equipment, the truth became undeniable. The bruises beneath her collar were clear. The rigidity in her posture was not formality, it was pain. And Thomas's hand pressing into her shoulder looked more like control than affection. In the archives of the Chicago Tribune, Marcus found her obituary from 1903. It said Catherine had died of a sudden and unexpected illness. The paper described her as a devoted wife and mother with no mention of violence or suspicion. But 6 months later, Thomas Whitmore remarried to his young secretary. Even for that era, the haste was scandalous. And still the newspapers called it a joyous new beginning. Jenny stared at the clippings in silence. "He planned this," she murmured, even before she was gone. The further they dug, the more unsettling the story became. Catherine's children, Emma and James, were separated soon after their mother's death, sent to live with different relatives in Milwaukee and Detroit. Thomas had remarried, yet sent his children away. Why? Through months of genealogical research, Marcus discovered that Emma Catherine's daughter had lived until 1984, and in her 80s, she had given an oral history interview to the Milwaukee Historical Society. When Marcus listened to the crackling recording, Emma's trembling voice carried across decades. "Mama used to write at night when Papa was asleep. She said if anything happened to her, we must tell someone. That the truth was behind the cellar wall." Emma described her mother's fear, her injuries, and the promise she had made to hide Catherine's writings behind a loose brick in their Chicago home. Marcus's heart pounded. Could the Whitmore house still exist? To his amazement, it did. A Victorian house on Maple Street, still standing after more than a century. When he visited the owner, Mrs. Rodriguez smiled knowingly. "Funny thing," she said, leading him to the basement. "We found some papers behind these bricks years ago. Never knew what to do with them. There in the dim light, Marcus pried loose the stone and pulled out a small metal box corroded with time. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, were Catherine's hidden papers, additional diary pages, unsent letters to her sister, photographs blurred but horrifying of her injuries, and one final letter addressed to the Chicago Police Department, dated just 3 weeks before her death. "I believe my husband intends to end my life," Catherine wrote. "If I do not survive, please know that my death was not of natural cause." Her words seemed to echo in the room, fragile yet defiant. Marcus and Jenny sat in silence, surrounded by the quiet hum of the century-old house. They knew now that the photograph wasn't just art, it was evidence, a testimony Catherine had built with every hidden mark, every carefully chosen pose. When Marcus presented his findings to the Chicago Historical Society and later to Detective Patricia Walsh from the Cold Case Unit, the reaction was profound. The evidence couldn't convict Thomas, but it revealed something deeper. Patterns of control, violence hidden behind respectability, a woman's silent courage preserved in cellulose and ink. Months later, the museum opened an exhibition, Hidden in Plain Sight: Domestic Violence Through American History. At its center hung the 1901 photograph, the family portrait of the Whitmores, now displayed under soft lighting. Visitors stood before it in silence, many with tears in their eyes, as Catherine's words were read softly over hidden speakers. "I pray that someone will understand what happened to me." The exhibition became one of the most visited in the museum's history. Survivors wrote letters to Marcus thanking him for giving voice to a woman who had been silenced for over a century. Even Catherine's descendants came, Emma's grandchildren and their children, to finally understand the truth their family had buried in shame. Catherine's great-great-granddaughter stood before the photograph and whispered, "She wasn't a victim. She was a witness." Today, the portrait still hangs in the Chicago Historical Society's main gallery, a reminder that sometimes the past doesn't sleep, it waits. It waits for someone patient enough to listen. And if you look closely under the soft museum light, Catherine's eyes still seem to hold that quiet plea across time, as if asking all who see her, "Will you finally hear me now?"